The void of space was silent, cold, and endless. Then, a signal broke through the darkness. It was weak at first, a trembling voice mixed with static, repeating again and again across countless star systems. The words were simple, desperate, and filled with fear. This is the VYR Coalition, to any who can hear us. Our worlds are burning. We need help. Please, someone, help us. The message traveled far, jumping from one relay beacon to another. Many civilizations heard it, but most chose to ignore it. Wars were common in the galaxy. A small, peaceful species being attacked was nothing new. Why get involved? Why risk their own fleets? But the VYR were different. They were a gentle race, known for their advanced science and medicine. Their ships were designed for exploration, not combat. For centuries, they had believed in peace and diplomacy. They thought reason could solve every problem. They were wrong. The enemy came without warning. The Core Dominion, a brutal warlike empire, swept into VYR territory like a storm. Their ships were jagged and black, their soldiers ruthless and merciless. The first colony fell in a single night. The second was glassed from orbit, burned until nothing remained but ash and molten rock. The VYR tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. Their fleets were slow, fragile, and poorly armed. Entire defense groups were destroyed in hours. Their homeworld was next. Panic spread across their systems like wildfire. So the VYR Council gathered and made one final decision. If they could not fight, they would beg. They would send a distress call to the galaxy, hoping someone, anyone, would come to their aid. They didn't care who answered, as long as the core were stopped. 4 days, there was only silence. Then, on the 5th day, a new signal appeared. This one was different. Strong. Confident. Help received. Reinforcements inbound. When the VYR heard those words, they wept with relief. The council chambers filled with cheers. Someone was coming to save them. Someone had heard their plea. The VYR leaders prepared a grand welcome. Banners were raised. The main spaceport above their homeworld was cleared to receive their saviors. Their people were told to have hope again. High above the planet, a fleet of surviving VYR ships gathered. From the command deck of the central station, Elder the Rick, leader of the council, watched the stars with trembling hands. His voice shook as he spoke to his advisors. "Who do you think answered the call?" he asked. "The Oryx Commonwealth, perhaps? Or maybe the Star League? They have powerful fleets." His second-in-command, Syrah, looked uncertain. "We don't know, Elder." Their message did not include a name. Only that they were coming. "Then whoever they are," the Rick said, taking a deep breath, "they are our salvation." Moments later, the sensors lit up. A hyperspace rift opened at the edge of the system, a glowing tear in reality itself. Everyone on the command deck gasped. "They're here!" Syrah cried. "Open a channel, quick!" The VYR held their breath, expecting to see sleek, beautiful ships like those of the Oryx or the League. Ships built for defense and peacekeeping. But what emerged from the rift was something else entirely. The first vessel was massive and dark, its hull scarred and armored. It looked more like a weapon than a ship. Then another followed, and another, until an entire armada filled the space above the planet. Their formation was tight and aggressive, like predators ready to strike. The VYR stared in silence, their hearts sinking. These were not graceful protectors. These were war machines. Syrah's voice trembled. "Elder the Rick, are you certain these are allies?" The Rick couldn't answer. His mouth had gone dry. Deep inside, a seed of fear began to grow. These ships didn't look like rescuers, they looked like conquerors. A deep, booming voice cut through the comm system. "This is the Terran Deathworlder Armada. Identify yourselves." The words were cold and commanding, spoken in a language the translators struggled to keep up with. Every VYR on the deck froze. Deathworlders. Syrah whispered. She turned to the Rick, her face pale. Elder, no, it can't be. The stories, they're real. The Rick swallowed hard. Deathworlders were the stuff of nightmares, creatures born on planets so dangerous that survival itself was a daily war. It was said their bodies were strong, their instincts violent, their minds hardened by constant struggle. And now, an entire fleet of them was here. This may be a mistake, the Rick said weakly. Perhaps they only look dangerous. Perhaps they mean well. But even as he spoke, he didn't believe his own words. The human voice came again, sharper this time. VYR Coalition, respond immediately. If you do not, we will assume hostile intent. The Rick forced himself to speak, his voice quivering. We are the VYR. We sent the distress call. We are under attack by the core dominion. We request aid. There was a long, terrible silence. The kind of silence that makes hearts pound faster. Then the human voice returned, low and calm. Request acknowledged. Stand by for combat deployment. The comm channel closed with a harsh click. The VYR stared at each other, unsure whether to feel hope or terror. Outside, the massive human fleet began to move, dark shapes sliding into formation like a pack of hunting beasts. Syrah clutched Therek's arm. Elder, she whispered, did we just invite saviors, or something far worse? The Rick had no answer. He could only watch as the Deathworlders advanced, and pray that he had not doomed his people with his desperate call for help. The VYR fleet floated in silence as the human armada moved closer. From the command deck, Elder the Rick could see their dark, monstrous ships on the screen. They looked nothing like the peaceful fleets of the Oryx or the shining cruisers of the Star League. These ships were angular, sharp, and built only for war. The humans approached with perfect precision. Not a single ship drifted out of formation. They moved like a single living creature, a predator ready to strike. Therek's voice trembled. Open communications. Quickly. His second-in-command, Syrah, nodded and sent the signal. A moment later, the screen flickered. A human appeared. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark military armor. His face was scarred, his eyes cold and sharp. He did not bow or smile. He simply stared at them with the calm gaze of someone who had seen too many battles. This is Admiral Graves of the Terran Deathworlder Armada, he said, his voice deep and commanding. You are the VYR. The Rick swallowed hard. Why yes, Admiral. We are the ones who sent the distress call. Our people are under attack by the core dominion. Please, we beg for your help. Graves gave a single nod, but his expression didn't change. We received your message. We are here to eliminate your enemy. Stand by and stay out of our way. The Rick blinked, confused. Wait, don't you want details first? Perhaps a strategy meeting? We can explain their troop movements, their numbers, their tactics. Graves interrupted him with a wave of his hand. Not necessary. We have already scanned the system and intercepted enemy communications. We know enough. The VYR leaders exchanged uneasy glances. The humans were acting with terrifying confidence, as if they didn't need anyone's help to plan this war. Syrah whispered to the Rick, her voice shaking. Elder, they are not like us. They don't negotiate. They just fight. The Rick nodded slowly. A dark feeling was growing in his chest. These Deathworlders were here to help, yes, but they seemed to treat war like breathing. Moments later, alarms rang through the station. Multiple enemy ships incoming. A VYR officer shouted. It's a core scouting fleet. On the screen, several jagged core ships appeared at the edge of the system. The VYR officers panicked, scrambling for orders. Their own ships were barely armed. They couldn't stand against even a small core squadron. The Rick turned to Graves. Admiral, what do we do? Graves didn't hesitate. His voice was calm and cold. "Stay where you are. Watch and learn." Before the Rick could respond, the human fleet moved. The Deathworlder warships shot forward like arrows, engines blazing. They didn't just engage the enemy, they charged them with frightening speed. The first volley of human weapons tore through the core ships like paper. Massive explosions lit up the void of space. The VYR stared, speechless. Their sensors couldn't even keep up with the battle. The humans were too fast, too precise, too brutal. Within minutes, the entire core scouting fleet was nothing but wreckage and fire. Not a single human ship had been lost. The VYR command deck was silent. Syrah's hands shook as she whispered, I've never seen anything like that." One of the younger officers swallowed hard. "Elder, they didn't even try to capture anyone. They just destroyed everything." Therek's throat felt tight. "Yes. They fight without mercy." Admiral Graves' voice came over the calm as ever. "Enemy threat neutralized. Scouting fleet eliminated. Moving to next phase of operations." The Rick forced himself to respond. "Admiral, forgive me for asking, but do you always fight this way?" Graves' eyes narrowed slightly. "We fight to win. Nothing else matters." Then the transmission ended. The VYR leaders stood frozen, the air thick with fear and unease. These humans were terrifying. They didn't seem like rescuers at all. They seemed like something far more dangerous, a force of nature given flesh and metal. Syrah turned to the Rick, her voice barely a whisper. "Elder, what if we have invited something worse than the core? What if they destroy our enemies today, and us tomorrow?" The Rick had no answer. He looked at the wreckage floating outside the station, the twisted remains of the core fleet, and shuddered. For centuries, the VYR had believed in diplomacy and peace. They thought all conflicts could be solved with reason. But these humans, they were different. They came from a place where survival was a battle fought every day. A death world. The Rick remembered the old stories, whispers passed from one species to another, stories most dismissed as myths. Beware the Deathworlders. If they come to fight for you, you may win your war, but you will never forget what you have unleashed. That night, the Rick couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his quarters, staring at the stars. Outside, the human fleet moved like silent predators, their massive warships patrolling the system. Suddenly, a soft alarm chimed. A message appeared on his private console. It was from Admiral Graves. The message was short. "Prepare your people. The main core force will arrive soon. Stay out of our way." Therek's blood ran cold. The scouting fleet they had seen was nothing. The real enemy was still coming. And the humans, they were ready. Too ready. Syrah entered the room quietly. "Elder, what did the humans say?" The Rick looked at her with haunted eyes. "They told us to prepare," he whispered. "Because the real war hasn't even begun." The two VYR leaders stood in silence, fear twisting their hearts. Outside, the Deathworlder Armada gathered its strength, preparing to face an enemy horde. Syrah spoke at last, her voice trembling. "Elder, I no longer know if we are the ones being saved, or conquered." The Rick could only stare at the human fleet and wonder the same thing. The stars trembled with the weight of war. From the VYR homeworld, Elder the Rick stood at the observation window of the central command tower. His eyes were locked on the dark shapes of the human fleet patrolling above the planet. The Deathworlder warships moved like a living storm, cold and silent, ready to strike at any moment. Behind him, Syrah entered quietly, carrying a datapad. Her face was pale. "Elder," she said softly, "our scouts have returned. They have troubling news." The Rick turned, his stomach sinking. "Tell me." Syrah took a deep breath. "The core Dominion fleet is much larger than we feared. At least 3 times the size of what the humans destroyed earlier." The Rick felt his knees weaken. 3 times. That is impossible. No fleet can stand against that. Her voice dropped even lower. Elder, the Corps are not just coming to fight. They are coming to end us. Their fleet will arrive within hours. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the command tower systems. Outside, the human ships remained in formation, calm and unmoving, as if they were waiting for this very moment. Minutes later, a message came through. The image of Admiral Graves appeared on the main screen. His face was expressionless, his tone sharp and direct. "VYR lack leadership," he said. "Our scans confirm a massive core fleet inbound. Main strike force. Their goal will be to destroy your homeworld entirely." The Rick tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Admiral, this is beyond anything we imagined. You cannot fight them alone." Graves' lips curled into the faintest of grim smiles. "We are not afraid of being outnumbered." Sira stepped forward, desperate. "Admiral, please. You do not understand the Corps. They are merciless. They have crushed every empire that stood against them. If you face them directly, you will all be destroyed." For a moment, Graves said nothing. His cold eyes locked onto hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was like steel. "No. It is you who do not understand the Corps, and why we are here." The command deck fell silent as Graves continued, his tone lower now, almost dangerous. "Years ago, before your people even knew of us, the Corps invaded a human colony," he said. "They slaughtered millions. Entire cities burned. They thought we were weak, like so many others. They were wrong." The Rick felt his skin grow cold. He had heard whispers of human brutality, but never directly from a human's own mouth. Graves went on, his words clipped and sharp. "From that day forward, we made a vow. No more colonies lost. No more innocents butchered. When the Corps attack, we do not defend, we eradicate." The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. Sira's eyes widened with fear and disbelief. "You fight them, for revenge?" she asked softly. Graves shook his head. "Not just revenge. We fight so no one else suffers what we did. You called for help, and we answered. But understand this, VYR, our way of helping is final." The screen went dark. For a moment, no one spoke. The VYR leaders stood frozen, their hearts pounding. Finally, the Rick whispered, "These humans, they are not saviors. They are avengers." Sira's hands trembled. "Elder, are we sure we want them to fight for us? What if, after the Corps are gone, they turn their weapons on us?" The Rick closed his eyes. He didn't know the answer. Suddenly, alarms blared. The enemy had arrived. Outside, space tore open with flashes of red light as the Corps fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Ship after ship appeared, a massive swarm of jagged black vessels stretching as far as the eye could see. Their weapons lit up the void like angry stars. Gasps filled the VYR command deck. Some officers fell to their knees in despair. "There are so many," one whispered. We are finished." But then, another voice cut through the fear, a human voice, calm and commanding. "Terran Armada, this is Admiral Graves. Engage at will." The human fleet sprang into action. Warships surged forward, engines blazing, weapons firing in perfect unison. The VYR watched in awe as the humans didn't wait for the enemy to strike. They charged headfirst into the Corps swarm. The battle had begun. On the VYR homeworld, civilians crowded in the streets, staring at the sky where the flashes of battle lit up the darkness. Some prayed. Others wept. Most simply stood in silence, unable to look away. In the command tower, the Rick gripped the railing, his voice shaking. They're outnumbered. Even the humans can't fight this many." Sira's eyes were wide with terror. "Elder, what do we do?" The Rick hesitated, then spoke with sudden resolve. "We fight." Sira gasped. What? Our ships are too weak. Our crews are untrained. Perhaps, the Rick said, but we cannot stand by and watch others die for us. If the humans fall, we fall too. We must stand with them, even if it costs us everything. He turned to the officers. Prepare every ship we have left. We join the battle. As the VYR fleet moved into formation, a final message came through from Admiral Graves. The human's face appeared on the screen, lit by the glow of battle. His voice was calm, almost mocking. Stay behind us if you want to live, he said. But if you run, you'll die anyway. The transmission ended, leaving only the sounds of weapons fire and the cries of war. The Rick stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The choice was clear: fight beside the humans, or be destroyed by the core. Forward, he shouted. For our people. For survival. The VYR fleet surged ahead, small and fragile beside the towering human warships. Above their world, the greatest battle in their history had begun. The void above the VYR homeworld was chaos. Flashes of light lit the dark sky as human and core ships clashed in a brutal, relentless battle. The core fleet was enormous, a black tide of warships spreading across the system. They fired without pause, filling space with deadly streams of plasma and fire. But the humans did not retreat. They charged. The Deathworlder Armada moved like a single beast, their warships tearing through enemy formations with terrifying precision. Every maneuver was fast, aggressive, and merciless. Where the core fought with brute numbers, the humans fought with skill and sheer willpower. From the command deck, Elder the Rick and Syrah watched the battle unfold on massive screens. Their own ships, smaller and weaker, stayed close to the human formation, firing cautiously from behind. Syrah clutched the edge of the console, her eyes wide with fear. They are everywhere, she whispered. The core outnumber them 10-1. The Rick nodded grimly. Yes. But the humans, they do not seem to care. The humans struck hard and fast. A squadron of Deathworlder ships dove straight into the enemy's center, breaking apart a core formation that was 3 times their size. Human boarding pods slammed into enemy hulls, cutting through metal like knives. Moments later, new images filled the screen, humans fighting hand-to-hand inside the core ships. The footage was raw and violent. The humans moved like predators, using brutal strength and perfect coordination. The core soldiers, though fierce, were no match. They fell one by one under the humans' relentless assault. A VYR officer turned pale. They are monsters. The Rick shook his head. No. They are survivors. There is a difference. Still, even he could not hide the fear in his voice. Hours passed. The battle raged without pause. The VYR ships fought bravely but suffered heavy losses. One by one, their fragile vessels were torn apart by enemy fire. The humans, however, refused to break. Even damaged ships kept fighting, limping forward like wounded animals that refused to die. Finally, a warning alarm blared across the deck. Syrah's hands flew over the controls. Elder, the core flagship is moving toward the planet. If it reaches the surface, it will destroy everything, the Rick finished, his voice breaking. On the screen, the massive core command ship loomed larger and larger, its weapons charging for a planetary strike. The VYR officers began to panic. There is nothing we can do, one cried. It's too powerful. But then, a calm, cold voice cut through the chaos. This is Admiral Graves. All human forces, target the flagship. Follow me. The Deathworlder fleet surged forward, leaving the smaller battles behind. Admiral Graves' flagship led the charge, engines roaring like thunder. Human warships cut through enemy lines, ignoring smaller vessels, focusing only on the massive ship ahead. The core fired everything they had at the humans. Explosions rocked the Deathworlder ships. Whole sections of hull burned away. But still, they pressed forward. The Rick stared in awe. They are throwing everything into this attack. Syrah's voice trembled. Why don't they retreat? Because, the Rick said softly, they never retreat. The final assault was brutal. Human boarding pods slammed into the core flagship, piercing its armor. Hundreds of Deathworlder soldiers stormed inside, fighting through corridors drenched in smoke and blood. The battle inside the ship was savage and close. Blades clashed. Weapons fired at point-blank range. The core fought desperately, but the humans were unstoppable. They moved with the fury of a species that had faced extinction before, and refused to face it again. At last, the core leader fell, his massive body collapsing under a hail of human gunfire. A final transmission echoed across the battlefield. Core command ship destroyed. Enemy chain of command broken. As the flagship exploded in a blinding flash, the remaining core ships faltered. Some fled. Others fought briefly before being destroyed. Without leadership, their invasion collapsed. The battle was over. The VYR command deck fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, cheers began to rise. Officers shouted in relief. Some cried openly. Their homeworld was safe. They had survived. The Rick, however, did not cheer. He simply watched the human ships, his expression heavy with unease. On the screen, Admiral Graves appeared, his face smeared with ash and blood. Despite the destruction around him, his voice was calm, almost casual. VYR Coalition, he said, your enemy is defeated. Your world is secure. The Rick bowed his head. Admiral, we can never repay this. You saved us when no one else would. For the first time, Graves gave a small, grim smile. We didn't do it for repayment. We did it because no one else could. Later, as the humans prepared to leave, Syrah stood beside the Rick on the spaceport platform, watching the massive fleet rise into orbit. She whispered, Elder, I do not understand them. They are terrifying, and yet, they fought for us. Therek's voice was low. They fought the core because they hate losing. They fight to win, no matter the cost. Even to themselves. Syrah glanced at him nervously. Do you think they will come back? The Rick was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, almost to himself. They will come back. Not as invaders, perhaps, but because war is in their nature. And when they return, we must be ready. As the last human warship vanished into hyperspace, a lone VYR officer whispered the thought on everyone's mind. We called for help, and what we got was something far more dangerous than we ever imagined. Far above, the empty stars held their silence, as if waiting for the next storm to come. The end.